It is time to once again glaze another Electro unit, because there's been so much in my opinion just not too good information about Veressa, so I'd like to shine more light on her as well as talk about certain things I've seen no other creator cover, which I think would massively increase her playability. Hello there, Flip here, and today I'm going to be going over why in my opinion Veressa is shaping up to be a top 3 DPS, if not the second best DPS in the game currently, with first place obviously going to Malvika. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta and I'll try to keep you updated. Channel members, virtual hugs to you all, the support means the world to me. We have now hit 15 members. Also, really quickly, why are people hating on Veressa so much? There seems to be so much hate for this character disproportionate to what she actually is, and I know that a lot of you guys may have some Natlan fatigue as we are entering the later patches, which there has been a lot of complaints about, so that's why I'm happy to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Once Human, one of the most anticipated free open world games that will be releasing globally on mobile devices on April 23rd, the pre-register being available via the link below. And the biggest highlight of the game to me is that they have no pay to win mechanics, with monetization being purely for cosmetics. And to speak to the quality of the game, it has received superb reviews across the board, with IGN rating the PC release an 8 out of 10, and the mobile release will aim to replicate the full PC experience, so let me tell you more. Once Human is a free-to-play open world RPG that I would say is like a AAA realistic Genshin, and unlike Genshin that has a more fantastical, lighthearted tone, Once Human plunges you into a gritty, more realistic post-apocalyptic world that's filled with some straight nightmare-fuel creatures, and each one of these monsters have deep backstories showcasing their lives before they were infected, back when they were once human. My favorite design of course being the creepy lady for no reason in particular. For the gameplay, Once Human incorporates a variety of different mechanics from different genres. You have the freedom to roam around anywhere in the environment to gather materials to help you build a base to fortify yourself against enemies, which you're also able to defeat to gain loot and upgrades. And the best part about this is the multiplayer aspect that allows you to play seamlessly alongside your friends. So after hearing all of this, hopefully you are as excited as I am to dive into the vast world of Once Human, so go ahead and click my link down below to visit oncehuman.game, or even pre-register on the Google Play or App Store to receive exclusive gold cosmetics, and enter the lucky draw for some neat prizes. Thank you Once Human for sponsoring the video, now back to it. I do plan to make a dedicated Veressa guide anyways, but to briefly go over her kit first before talking about why she's so strong, let me give a quick rundown on how she functions. Veressa is a 5-star Electro DPS and her playstyle revolves around chaining her plunge combos together. Her skill is used primarily to enable her to do a plunge attack, so you won't need someone like Xianyun to enable it for her. And then she has 3 different elemental bursts, but for what's actually important, the burst she normally uses in her rotation serves as a combo ender before starting her next chain. Her base C0 combo looks like this. I'll have the notation up on screen for you. It is somewhat more complex than what you'd usually have to do with a Genshin character, so you do have to be more aware of how you approach her gameplay, as using a skill or burst at the wrong time can lead to a reset. She's a much more mechanically involved character than someone like Arlecchino or Neuvillette, who you can play practically on autopilot, so that may be a downside to some. Also, before I get into why Veressa is so good, I just want to make a few disclaimers. The first being that Veressa isn't out yet. Despite all the calculations and arguments I'll provide for Veressa being strong, she can end up feeling like shit to play, and even though I am going to go on about how strong Veressa is, she's a post-Malvika DPS, and what I mean by this is that every time Genshin raises the ceiling of the game either through reactions or through strong damage dealers, the average damage and quality of life of every subsequent damage dealer improves. So you kind of have to think of Malvika like Gojo. The way his birth made it so that all the cursed spirits were stronger to balance the world out, because Malvika exists and has raised the bar for her DPS, they are now going to make every future limited DPS super strong. So if Veressa isn't a rarity, Skirka is most likely going to be strong as well, on top of the Nodcry units they're about to release next year. Please do not pull characters purely for the fact they are strong, because that isn't a unique thing. Pull for characters because you actually like them or their playstyle. Chasing the new strongest is one of the fastest ways to break your accounts if you aren't going to continue to funnel resources into your teams. And with the disclaimers out of the way so I won't be held accountable for anyone's financial decisions, let's proceed with the Veressa glazing. I was going to start this video off differently and talk about Veressa's damage output later, as I don't like using damage numbers as an end-all be-all metric, but people are saying that Veressa is Malvika reliant, which isn't true at all, so I would like to address that first. And as always with all my Veressa videos, I want to give a hunormous, I don't think hunormous, it's humongous because humongosaur. Anyways, humongous shout out to Vomfi as always for all the calculations in the video. He's helped me out a ton, so make sure to go to his Twitch streams for any future calculations on pre-release characters, as he's one of the fastest people to get good information out. Now with Veressa, her strongest team currently is going to be Malvika, Eonton, and Chevreuse, and even with the C2 Eonton, this team is competing, if not theoretically, ahead of meta staples like Arlecchino, which is huge obviously. Malvika is one of the leading reasons why this team works so well because she's able to get both Bennett and Yonton's buffs onto her elemental burst, and her sub DPS does a lot for the team. If you compare this to other teams like the traditional plunge core, even though you get strong buffs from both Furina and Xianyun, they just can't overcome the damage gap between having Malvika's damage, on top of the fact that people are assuming a longer rotation on Xianyun teams, which affects the DPS as you'd have to do more damage to compensate for how long the rotation is. And other Chevreuse variants people looked at obviously didn't stack up as well, so with the context of her needing Malvika for her strongest teams with the rest of her teams not being that competitive, people came to the conclusion that she's Malvika reliant. But I'm here to tell you that there's other very strong Veressa teams people have been overlooking because of the pre-existing notion with the current Chevreuse carries we have. Normally in Chevreuse teams, you of course need your Pyro or Electro DPS and then off-field application of the opposite element in order to maintain uptime on Chevreuse's Res Shred, which lasts for 6 seconds on an enemy after triggering overload. This is why you can't really play a team like Raiden, Chevreuse, Sora, Bennett to its full effectiveness, because Chevreuse's resistance shred will run out like 2/3 of the way into Raiden's field time. But with Veressa, she doesn't actually have the same restriction. Unlike Chlorind, Raiden, Shaska, Kinich, or any other DPS that has a skill state, Veressa doesn't. So even if you swap out of her mid-rotation, you don't really lose anything. Her Night Soul points are retained even when you swap off, and the only thing I think you could lose is her Apex drive state, as you have a small window to burst after doing your Fiery Passion plunge, so don't swap off if you have this. But otherwise, with all of this in mind, you can do a rotation like this with Bennett, where after your first Veressa string, you can swap off Veressa to do a skill with Bennett, which gives Pyro Particles as well as reapplying Chevreuse's resistance shred to enemies. And then you can swap back into Veressa and then finish your combo. And if you look at Vomfi's calculation for the team, Bennett's additional buffing seems to be able to overcome the damage gap that Malvika would fill in, with the caveat being that swapping in and out of Bennett would take an extra second. But even with that, the damage per rotation is extremely close, and with the C6 Eonson, Veressa is still pretty comfortably ahead of most other DPS units besides Malvika theoretically. And unlike what others are saying, she doesn't need Malvika for this performance at all. Additionally, if you're able to get constellations on your Veressa or just really high artifact investment, there's going to be that point where investing in her damage which Bennett enables is going to be more valuable than Malvika's sub DPS damage. So yeah, Veressa enables Bennett Eonton comps, which is a very big bonus. Also, another thing is that at this point, a lot of people do have Furina constellations, and in this banner you can also get Xianyun constellations, primarily her C2, to where again, if you have this level of vertical investment, you're going to quickly outgrow the need to slot Malvika into your teams. All this to say, I don't like the Malvika reliant claims. I don't think it's going to hold up long term to anyone who actually wants to invest long term into Veressa, nor do I think it's particularly helpful advice. Also, breaking news, I've just been colluding with some theory crafting friends, and Veressa being able to freely switch up makes it so that Xiangling is even more of a viable option than what's normally assumed, as you can play 18-second long rotations with Xiangling and not 20 seconds, which was the main drawback. This is because you can do what's called a desynced rotation and switch in Xiangling at different points on her rotation, instead of waiting for her burst to go off cooldown. So what this allows is that you'll be able to do your first rotation as normal, and then in your second rotation, after Veressa does her first skill plunge combo, you can swap back into Xiangling to burst, instead of waiting. And then afterwards you can go back into Veressa and finish your combo. And for your third rotation, you do it after your first 2 plunge attacks. And then after your third rotation, if you even need one at that point, there are some slight rotational issues, as you most likely lose some uptime on Chevreuse, but it works fine for 3 simultaneous rotations. That's good enough for me. So essentially, Xiangling teams with Veressa aren't 20 seconds long like with other characters, they are in fact 18 seconds long with desyncing, which can be somewhat mechanically hard to do, but assuming you can desync, this is the third best Veressa Chevreuse team. Breaking news part 2, the thing that makes Furina Xianyun teams worse as well is also the fact that it uses 20-second long rotations. But as I just explained, with desynced rotations you can also do the same thing with Furina and make this an 18-second long rotation, so this also shouldn't have the 20-second rotation lock, assuming you can pull this off. Very interesting Veressa tech in my opinion, and I'm surprised no one has really talked about this, at least to my knowledge. If you want to talk about Veressa's flaws, I guess team scarcity is a problem with her, because she has her Chevreuse teams and then her Xianyun teams and everything else kind of sucks. Aggravate isn't that great because Veressa actually has good multipliers and doesn't hit as frequently as someone like Chlorend to get as good advantage of its flat increase. Superconduct teams don't exist, and if I catch anyone playing Veressa Hybrid Bloom, I'll slap you. So she is pretty much just left with those 2 archetypes of Chevreuse and Xianyun, and the problem I have with Veressa and her best team needing Chevreuse is just the fact that Chevreuse just ran. Chevreuse is commonly run with other Electro DPS, specifically Raiden if we're picking up a pattern, and unless they plan to make a Raiden Veressa banner, there's just a high chance that you'll never see a Veressa banner with Chevreuse alongside it, and even if that banner does exist, it's going to be hard to pick up Chevreuse constellations anyways. So it's just an artificial way to hinder your ability to get your teams to the max performance, which I don't like. And in regards to how Veressa stacks up to the current premier Electro DPS being Chlorend, it doesn't seem like cloned will be able to get the C6 Eonton damage buff sadly, so when factoring all this into a calculation, even a cloned with a C6 Eonton would lose to a Veressa with a C2 Eonton. Don't ask why the standards are like that, Vomfi just wanted to rub salt in the wound. In terms of theoretical damage at least, Veressa's peaks are just looking to be higher than Chlorine's. Now besides damage, there are other reasons why I think Veressa is such a good DPS. The first being that she isn't tied to any state, which allows her to swap off mid combo, which as we can see with Xiangling and Bennett, which is a big upside to her team building, and in practice can lead to other advantages that aren't reflected in a sheet as well, which is also the same for her other upside, which being a Natlan character, she gets a ton of base interruption resistance increases, so she won't get ragdolled like other old DPS can, which is just nice quality of life. She also has some of the best and most consistent AoE in the game. Her plunge radius seems to be the ultra wide plunge radius that Zhao has and Gaming has at C6, and both her charge attack and skill can go through enemies, as well as having the same radius to Chlorine's skill. So even with overload knocking enemies away, it doesn't seem like you'll have any struggle with managing multiple targets like other DPS do. And because their hits are so consistent, you also don't really run into as bad overkilling issues that someone like Mualani has. All this to say, I can't really see a type of content she would really struggle with at all if I'm being honest. The only problem I can see with her damage profile is that she doesn't really have a way of front-loading damage, which for these new Abyss lineups to have multiple waves of strong elite enemies and then a boss are very helpful, but compared to all her other upsides, this doesn't seem like that massive of an issue, unless you're a speedrunner I guess. Anything else I want to say about Veressa will most likely be details more when we can actually play her, so I'll just leave it there for now. All in all, Veressa is really strong. Even without Malvika, she has a solid amount of good options, whether you go down the Chevries or Shanyan route, with a good path for Dolphin investment if you decide to go into Furina or Shanyan constellations. With her Chevreuse teams, there are some issues as it may be hard to get the 4-star she needs to reach top performance, but even without those 4-star constellations, she's still dominating a majority of the cast anyways, so this is more of a self-contained flaw more than a meta-wide one. She also seems to have some depth to her combat which can allow people to push higher damage out of her, or at least give some sort of gameplay expression with how you deal with combat, especially since you can switch out of her during her field time. Her team flexibility is a lot better than what people are making out to be, and her AoE is some of the best in the game whilst having ludicrous numbers in single target. So in my opinion, I don't see how Veressa can be anything but the second best DPS in the game, unless she absolutely sucks to play in practice, but we'll see. She's just looking to be one of the most complete DPS we have in the game with the numbers to back it up. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Veressa, as I love to hear and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, I love you all. Your support means the world to me. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.